Hi, in this session, we're going to be talking about UVW maps, multi-sub-object materials, and V-Ray light materials. First, I'm just going to create just a box, and I'm going to modify this box to become something else. For example, we just did before in the previous course, we just created a chair from this box. So I'm just going to create something else. Doesn't matter the model, just going to just modify it in a way. So maybe something like that, and then I'm going to extrude it, and then I'm going to do it again, then extrude. That's perfect. Just going to select this. I'm going to do the same, maybe bevel, then extrude, and then I'm going to say bevel again, and then extrude, and then I'm going to extrude again. Okay, I'm just going to select this. I'm going to extrude it several times. Perfect. That's it. Just created anything. Doesn't matter what's the object. Now, I just want to assign materials to this object. So I'm just going to select this. I'm going to go press M on the keyboard for the material editor. Just click and drag to drop this material. That's perfect. And I just can play around with the reflection, refraction, glossiness, and so on, as I talked before. Now, I'm just going to insert a texture in here. I'm going to go to diffuse map, as before. I'm going to go bitmap. And I'm going to just bring any texture, for example, this brick. It's assigned in here. Just going to go show shade material viewport. And as you can see, I have a problem. Before, everything was perfect, but now things are not really good. What happened exactly? Usually, when we're working with the instance shapes, the standard primitives, the native models that are found in Max, when we assign material to them, they will work perfectly, especially when we're assigning textures, I mean. So they work perfectly because the UVW of these objects are well known, because they are native inside Max. But when I start to model this object from a box to become, let's say, a chair or a table or a car or a plane or anything else, the UVW get confused. What we need to do is basically we need to remap it again. So all we need to do, we just have to select the object, and I'm going to go to modifier, to the modifier list, and I'm going to access something called UVW Map. When I put UVW Map, you can see now the object is fixed from top and from bottom, but from the sides, it's not. So usually when we put a remapping, it has a characteristic. So we need to know what kind of mapping type. By default, it's a planar mapping, which is going to be mapping from top and from the bottom based on this orange gizmo. If you want something else, depending on the model you have, so you can go cylindrical, which is some kind of circular cylindrical, and I can have it with a cap. It means from the top and bottom or not. I can go spherical, and I can go box. In our case, most of the UVW map that we're going to be using is box, but sometimes we have to use something different, such as cylindrical or spherical. So I just placed a box, and as you can see, it is fixed. So the projection is coming from 6 sides, from the sides, from the top and bottom, and from the front and back. Okay, so now I have the box. Now I go down, I have the length, the width, and height, so I can kind of tile it or scale this map on the U, the V, and the W. This is the V and the W. So let's say, for example, I want it to be 65 centimeters. So this image is going to be 65 centimeters, the size of it, which is the square image, which is the original map in here, which is this image. I decided that this image is 65 centimeters, 65 centimeters, and 65 centimeters. That's why it's a bit not perfect, because this is not a square. But still, it's not the big deal. So I can just make it something like that. So it should be maybe 75 in the height. So I think, sorry, 75. So it should be something like that, maybe. And then I can scale it up or down if I need to. It's not a big deal. So you can do it visually and work around with it. So this is basically UVW map. What if I have another box? For example, maybe a bigger box, much bigger box. Okay. And then I decided to place the same material So I just click and drag and drop this box, and as you can see, I got this material on it, which is perfect. But the problem is you can see the brick in here is much smaller than the bigger brick in here. And let's make it more smaller so you can really differentiate between. Let's say I'm gonna make them 40. Okay, great. So you can see that the bricks in here are much smaller. Okay, so I want this brick to be the same. This is another model, okay, but I want it to be the same size. So all I need to do, I have to insert a UVW in my case. So I'm gonna have a UVW map. I can definitely go to the tiling and fix the tiling from here, but that won't be the exact solution for that. So I'm gonna go UVW map, and I can put box, and I can play around with the values in here. If I don't know the values over here, what are they? So I can just copy these 40, 40, 40, and it will become the same, which is perfect. This is it. But what if I don't want to do that? So I can just match the scale. So I'm gonna go in here. So I'm gonna go to something called acquire, and I'm gonna acquire from this object. And then I have two types of acquiring. I can acquire relative and absolute. Acquire relative, it means the same size. Acquire relative, it means they are continuous, and I will show you in a moment. So now they are the same size. Now, what if I have another box in here? So I'm just gonna snap it. So S for snap, I'm gonna snap this here. And actually I should have changed this before. So I'm just gonna change the value of these and now snap it. So I'm gonna snap it again. Perfect. Now I have these two objects and I want them to be the same material. So I just have to acquire from this relative. Now if you go acquire from, I need to acquire from this, I think. Okay, relative. As you can see, it's not working. Fine. I'm just gonna add my UVW map again because it's not working properly. Acquire from this and relative. As you can see, they are maybe the same size, but there's something wrong with it. I think because I've scaled it, it's my bad. So I'm just gonna draw another box, something like that. Sorry, my bad. Just to make it clear. So I'm just gonna make sure that it's snapped over here, and I'm gonna assign the new material to it. And now UVW map again. So UVW map and box. Oh, no need for box. I'm just gonna say acquire from this relative. Okay. Now you can see the sizes they're weird. They're not the same. Okay. In my case, sometimes it's better because they are different sizes. What I have to do, I have to say acquire from this, but absolute. What does absolute means? It's just going to take the same UVW map and it will continue it. And as you can see, it looks like it's continuous and there's not a separator in here. Okay, so it's continuous. That's why we use acquire absolute or relative just to have the same size. So if this is over here, it doesn't really matter. So it matters to have the same size. So this is the difference between acquire and absolute. So that's all about UVW maps. So UVW maps are very important, especially when you are importing objects. For example, in my previous practice, I just import a DWG file and an Illustrator file. So if I import any line, for example, I'm just gonna draw this kind of line, okay? And I'm gonna go to outline and I'm gonna go to splines and outline it. Just gonna give it a thickness and I'm gonna extrude it. I just created this shape or this thing, okay? Now, if I go to materials and I assign this material to it and show shaded material to viewport, you can see that nothing has been shown. So this is why we need a UVW map most of the times. And in my case, this is also a box. And I play around with the values, how much I want it. So for example, in my case, I want it to be maybe 100 by 100 by 100. Okay, so this is what I want. So you can see I have this wall or this box or this line that's extruded. It has the material. So most of the time we're going to be using UVW maps to fix our textures. We're going to remap my UVW to a different mapping type in terms of planar or cylindrical or spherical or a box. Great. Now, the other thing I'm going to talk about is basically if I have this object and I want to have two different materials to it, I need a material from the inside, another material from the outside. So what I need to do? All I need to do is basically add an edit poly to it. So when I have an edit poly, okay, I have something very important in here. When I go to, I'm just going to close them all. If you go to polygons, you can see I have an edit poly new, and I have something called material IDs, which is new. In my case, every polygon, it has an ID, it has a name. As you can see, it has number 3, number 3, number 3, and so on. In this case, everything is the same. So all of them may be number 3. As you can see, this is number 1 maybe. It doesn't matter. What I need is basically to name them. I'm just going to select them all. I'm going to give them ID number 1 maybe. And now I'm going to change. So the ones on the outside, I'm going to name them number 2. And the ones on the top and bottom, I'm going to name them number 3. Now I have, number 3. Okay, now I have 3 IDs. You can select them here. I can go ID number 1, select IDs, and it will select me all the ID number 1. Okay, if you go ID number 2, select IDs, these are the ID number 2. So there's something wrong in here. Let me check. So ID number 2, yes, this is ID number 2. And ID number 3, I just have to deselect. Select ID number 3, these are number 3. I want also this and this to be with ID number 3, so I'm going to set them all to be ID number 3. Great. So now I just named them and what I want. I'm going to go to the material editor. I'm just going to access any empty material. Instead of working with V-Ray MTL, I'm just going to access this, and I'm going to look for something called multi-sub-object material. Okay, so I'm going to enter to this. I'm going to discard all material. So it's going to replace. This is technically, it's a material holder. It just have several materials on it. In my case, I have to set my number to 3 because I need 3 materials. So I'm going to have only three materials with 3 different IDs. This is ID number 1, the back is ID number 2, and the up part and the lower part is ID number 3 on the sides. So I can just go in here on ID number 1, and I can put a V-Ray MTL, a new V-Ray MTL, and I want this V-Ray MTL to be, for example, whatever. Let's say I'm just going to make it a color. Okay, I'm just going to make it a red color. I can have a texture, I can do whatever. So this is ID number 1. ID number 2, I can just go in here and get a V-Ray MTL, or I can just work with the existing material. So I just click and drag, and I'm going to drop this brick into V-Ray number 2. And the V-Ray ID number 3, I want it to be this one, which is not an even texture. So just go in here, click and drag, and drop it in here. So I assigned these 3 materials, which are V-Ray materials. The first one is just a red material. The second one is just the brick material. And the third one, it's by this case also red. So I'm just going to access this V-Ray material, the new material, which is assigned on the ID 3. I'm just going to make it, let's say, white. Or I just don't want to make it white. I just want to add a texture to it. So I'm just going to add a bitmap, just like regular materials. And I'm going to access, let's say, this wood material, and I'm going to place it on it. So this is going, and I can work with the tiling and everything else, and also with the material by itself. Now I back to the material. If I go back to parent now, I just have one level up, which is this main parent. The main parent is the multi-sub-object material. It has 3 materials. Material 1, ID 1, it's red material. ID 2, it's a brick material. ID 3, it's a white wood material. Now, all I need to do is just select this object, the material, the multi-sub material object. Okay, in my case, just click and drag and drop it here. Now you can see that the ID 1 is red, the ID 3 is white, and the ID 2 is the brick one. So I can just work with that and do whatever I want. Now, the top area, it's not really clear. The ID 3 is basically maybe because of the UVW map. So I'm just going to make sure to put the UVW map on top of those so I can see better and make sure everything is correct that I've done. There's something wrong, it seems, with the UVW. I can just select this. Sorry, I have to just select this and make sure the material in here, it says show material inside. Okay, so in here, so I can see it now. I can see the texture. Now I can just access the UVW map and maybe work with the UVW. So in my case, this is the V, it's accessing this. But I care about this side, which I'm gonna make it maybe a bit thinner, so I can see the wood planks better. So I can see the wood from top, I can see the brick from this side, and I can see just a plain color red from this side using these three materials by using a multi-sub object material. All you need to do, just inside the edit poly, you have to assign IDs to which object. For example, I want this material ID to be ID 4, just adding a new material. So now, if I go in here, I can access a new ID, so I'm gonna set 4 numbers. So this is going to be ID number 4. I'm gonna access it. I'm gonna make sure it's a V-Ray MTL. And I want it to be, for example, just add a diffuse, bitmap, and I'm gonna put my logo. Show. This is it. Okay, so I have several materials. I have 4 materials now. This is ID 1, which is red, ID 4, which is my logo, ID 2, sorry, the brick, and ID 3, the wood. So I just added several materials on the same object using multi-sub object material and using a UVW map to assign, also edit poly to assign the materials and UVW map to fix the materials. Great. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about material, which we're going to talk later on, is basically a different type of material. So if I have, let's say, a box or any object, doesn't matter the object, I'm just going to select this object. I'm going to go to materials. I'm going to assign any material. So created this box, I'm just going to assign a material to it, any material. Okay, instead of having a V-Ray material to it, now I'm going to just change this material from a V-Ray MTL to something called V-Ray light MTL. So now it will become a light. Okay, so this is the object I'm working with. So click and drag and drop it here. And now you can see this is a light. It's not just a material, it's a light material, and it will light the scene. So now if I have a specific object I want it to be a source of light, I just can give it a light material and assign it to it. I can change the color, have it maybe red or any other color I want. And I can change the value of the light, how much intense the light is going to be or not. So you can see in here, just can show you a bit. So for example, I'm going to put 0.5. You can see the light is a bit low. I'm going to make it maybe 5. And you can see the light is going to be much stronger. Okay, so this is the source of light. And I can also add, instead of having the light to be a color, okay, I can have a bitmap. So in my case, I can get an image or anything. For example, I don't have now, it's just maybe this. And now this is going to be the light. So it's going to be lit from these colors like white and blue and so on, as if this cloth is just on the light and it's emitting light. So it's going to emit these colors, such as, for example, if you're working with the screen, you want the screen to be as if it's lit. So let's say a TV or anything. So we can just add an image to it and make it lit. So this is basically, we're going to do the practice on that later when we work with lighting. But just I'm introducing this now because we're talking about materials. So this is called a V-Ray light MTL. And definitely we talked about the V-Ray material, V-Ray MTL, which is the regular one. And also in this session, we introduced the multi-sub object material, which is a material holder that holds different materials. Now, in the next sessions, we're going to do a practical exercises for materials. And definitely we're going to open a file, which is preset with light and camera and the render setup, so we can just do the testing on the material, so you can understand better and how we can achieve good results and good quality materials.